My name's Sean Brooks, and I would just like to wish you all a happy Saturday. And today I'd like to talk about my Appalachian Trail journey. In 2015, what is the Appalachian Trail? The Appalachian Trail is a trail that spans from Georgia to Maine, and it's 2,200 miles long and goes through 14 states. It took me 5 months to hike, and the reason why I wanted to hike it was to try something new in my life. I had worked at a job for 4.5 years, and I would say that I was pretty miserable at that point in my life. And I was reading travel books and stumbled across a book written by William T. Volman that said that I should do exactly what I feared. At that point in my life, what I feared was not knowing what would happen to me if I quit my job and didn't have any income. So I quit my job, put in 2 weeks' notice, and decided that I would go to Mexico. But after pitching that idea to my parents, they said, "No way, Jose." And so I decided that I would need to have a journey and write about it. What other journey than to hike the Appalachian Trail? For me, I hadn't been outside the state of North Carolina very much, and over the 5 months of hiking the trail, it was completely transformative. I'm sure if you've ever met someone who has hiked the trail, they would say the same thing. The first, the weeks in preparation, I ended up packing about a 40-pound pack when I started, and I didn't really understand what I was doing until about 3 or 4 days of hiking with all that food and gear. And I remember writing in my journal that this was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And it had rained every day since the first day. And I can remember getting to Neal's Gap, which is a place in Georgia, which is 30 miles into the trail, and over $1 million worth of gear is sent back at this location from all the hikers who start the Appalachian Trail and realize that what they have, they don't need. And so I bought a lighter pack, and I sent home my backpack. And I believe I sent back the rope that I had for hanging a bear hang. I sent back, I believe, around 5 or 10 pounds worth of stuff. And I realized that I was carrying about 10 days worth of food when I only needed around 3 or 4. But the real lesson was, at the very beginning, was that if I don't start thinking long term and planning each particular section of the trail to help me get from point A to point B, I would fail to hike. There were many people that had I had never, like I had started with and started talking with, and I never would see them again. And when I first started, I hiked with this guy from Kentucky, and he had already attempted to hike the AT, and he had made it until Northern Virginia 2 years earlier, until he got off to go to a concert to work because he ran out of money. And I enjoyed hiking with him because he had way more experience than I did. And he taught me that you didn't need a bear hang. You needed to pack light. And that this trail was a very long journey. And so I hiked with him because he made me feel comfortable. And then I remember that first night after Neil's Gap and getting rid of like my bear hang. That next night I could not sleep because I got rid of my bear hang. And I had my food bag inside my tent. I was so scared that the bears were going to come, but they never came. And so I just kept on going. And eventually I started to like get a motto of like, after the days of rain, like the first 10 days of my Appalachian Trail experience, it was all rain. And it was miserable because I would get up, I'd be wet, I'd have to put on my wet clothes, and I'd have to walk another 10 to 15 miles. And my legs ached, and it was harder than like any other trail race that I had done. It was like doing a trail race back to back to back to back to back to back. And I also realized that I would have to continue doing this for months on end. So really I had to like create these mantras of like embracing the pain, or like there was a very popular saying that if you have no rain, then you won't get to Maine. So like I would continuously meet new people, and they would say no rain, no Maine, and that would keep us going. And I just remember on the 8th night setting up my tent and being thankful that everything was working out. And literally the next morning I woke up and I was in water. Like my sleeping pad was basically floating, and it was so dark I couldn't really see. It was like 5 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, and I was literally in like a pool of water. And I packed up all my gear as best I could. I was freezing cold. I was completely wet. All my gear was wet. It weighed like an extra 10 pounds. And I was like, I'm just hiking to Franklin, North Carolina, to I-26, where I could just hitch a ride into town and get dry and get a good warm meal. And that morning, like hiking out, like I got my blood flowing, I got my temperature up, I started feeling a little better, but I was still like soaking wet, and I knew that if I stopped moving, I would be miserable again. And that morning, I can just remember hiking up this ridge and seeing this little baby bear cub. It was literally like this big, and it was sitting on the side of the trail, and it had its little muzzle inside a log. And I was just like, holy that is a bear cub. And so I backed away from it. And I was like, where's mom? Like, where's mom? And I looked around, like looked both sides, and just was like, this is crazy. And I stopped and I like slowly approached the bear cub, like literally where it was like right at my feet, and just watched it like cross the trail. And it had this weird gait, and I was like, oh man, this bear cub is like abandoned. And it was a bear sanctuary, so you're not supposed to mess with the bears, but it was one of the most like remarkable experiences that I've had with like wildlife, where to see like such a little bear cub in the wild was just something so special. And that morning I was like, this is literally like why I'm out here, like just to see these things, because I could have been in the office, an office that I had been in for like 4 straight years, but I was here, like watching a bear cub, like for like the first time. It just seemed like such a better way to spend my life, was with a new experience. And I ended up hiking 18 miles that day to I-26, where I could hitch a ride. And by the time I got to I-26, I was freezing, and I literally just paced the side of the highway with my finger up, just like praying that someone would take me in. And I called the hostel down below to come pick me up. They didn't pick up. And after about 20 minutes, this old Buick pulls up. And if you want to hear about the rest of it, just stay tuned for my next clip. Alright, take care.